Please don't make me go back inside that house. She said it barefoot, on my porch, at 2 in the morning, in October, with no coat. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was going to end a marriage, expose a crime, and change the way I looked at my own son for the rest of my life. There was a key in her hand. She wouldn't let go of it, not even when I tried to bring her inside. My name is Carol Ann Whitfield. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a labor and delivery nurse at Mercy General in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I retired 2 years ago with a pension and a bad knee. I'm telling you this story because I think somebody out there needs to hear it. If this is your first time here, this channel is called The Quiet Rise, and if you've got a minute when it's over, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. It helps more than you'd think. Now, let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand where it started, 6 months earlier. It was a Sunday in April, and my son Daniel was turning 34. We did it the way we always did at my house, the one my late husband, Robert, built additions onto with his own hands before the cancer took him in 2019. The smell of it comes back to me even now. Charcoal smoke drifting off the grill. My sister Renee's potato salad, too much mustard, same as every year. Somebody's kids running through the sprinkler even though it wasn't quite warm enough yet. Daniel's wife Priya was there setting up the folding chairs, 29 years old. Sharp, quiet in a way that I used to think was just shyness. She'd married Daniel 3 years earlier. Small courthouse wedding. I liked her from the start. She brought me a bag of turmeric and cardamom the first time she came to dinner. Said her mother always said a full spice rack was a sign of a full life. I still have that bag. I use it every week. That day, at the birthday party, the sun was warm on the back of my neck. Robert's old wind chimes were clinking on the porch. Everything felt ordinary. Safe. The kind of afternoon you don't think to hold on to because you assume there will be 100 more just like it. There weren't. Let me tell you a little more about that day, because I've replayed it so many times since that I could probably draw you a map of the backyard. Robert had planted a row of crepe myrtles along the fence line the year before he got sick, and by that April they were just starting to bud, little tight pink fists getting ready to open. I remember thinking, that morning, that I should trim them back, and then getting distracted by the potato salad and never doing it. My neighbor Gail came by around noon to drop off a card, stayed for a glass of sweet tea, told me about her granddaughter's dance recital, ordinary talk, the kind of talk that fills up a life without you noticing. Daniel showed up around 1, alone. Said Priya was finishing something up at the office and would meet him there. That struck me as odd. Even then it was a Sunday, and Priya worked in accounting, not surgery, but I let it go. People work weekends, sometimes. I told myself that. She arrived at 2, a little flushed, said traffic was bad on the expressway, which didn't quite track because her office was only 15 minutes away. She kissed my cheek, smelled like she'd just put on perfume in the car, and went straight to setting up the folding chairs without being asked. She always did that. Made herself useful before anybody had to ask her to. My sister Renee showed up with her husband and their 2 boys, who went straight for the sprinkler even though I'd told them 3 times. The water wasn't warm yet. Kids never listened to that kind of warning. Neither, I suppose, do mothers-in-law who convince themselves everything is fine. V3. We had burgers on the grill and Robert's old Bluetooth speaker playing whatever playlist Daniel had put together. Mostly songs from when he was in high school. I remember September by Earth, Wind and Fire came on, and Renee grabbed my hands and made me dance in the grass, even though my knee complained about it the next 3 days. It was a good afternoon. I want you to understand that. Nothing about it screamed warning. If somebody had told me that day that inside of 6 months I'd be sitting across from a detective explaining forged signatures, I would have laughed and asked what they'd been drinking. That's the thing about the worst chapters of your life. They rarely announce themselves. They just sit down at the table with the potato salad, and you don't recognize them until much later. Around 4 o'clock, Daniel stood up to make a toast. He had a beer in one hand, his phone buzzing in his pocket. I remember that detail because he kept patting it like it was bothering him. He raised his glass and thanked everybody for coming. Then Priya asked, casual, not accusing, just asking, who keeps texting you today, on your birthday? He laughed, a short laugh. Too short. Work, he said. On a Sunday, Priya. Just her name. Flat. A warning wrapped in 2 syllables. She didn't push it. She smiled, sat back down, and passed the coleslaw to my sister like nothing happened. But I saw her hand. It was shaking, who slightly around the serving spoon. I told myself it was nothing. Married couples bicker. I told myself that for 6 more months. I want to be honest with you about something. For a long time after that day, I thought I was the problem. I kept remembering something my husband used to say. Robert wasn't a man of many words, but he used to tell me, Carol Ann, you'll worry a stone into a mountain if you let yourself. He said it with love. He said it because I used to lie awake, convinced the sky was falling over nothing. So when I started noticing things, Daniel canceling Sunday dinners, Priya getting quieter, thinner, somehow smaller in her own skin, I told myself I was doing exactly what Robert warned me about, worrying a stone into a mountain. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who meddles. I didn't want to insert myself into their marriage over nothing. Daniel was my only son. I raised him alone for the last 6 years of his life with his father. Mostly alone even before that, because Robert worked oil rigs 3 weeks out of 4. I loved my son. I still love my son. That's important for you to understand, because everything that happened after this didn't come from hatred. It came from love that had to go looking for the truth, whether I wanted to or not. There's a particular kind of guilt that comes with suspecting your own child of something ugly. Nobody warns you about that guilt when you're raising them. You spend 18 years teaching a boy right from wrong, packing his lunches, sitting up with him through fevers. And some part of you assumes that work is finished once he becomes a man. You assume the character you built into him is permanent, like a foundation poured in concrete. I remember lying awake one night in May, staring at the ceiling fan going around and around, trying to talk myself out of what I was starting to feel. I thought about Daniel at 8 years old, crying because he'd stepped on a beetle by accident, and felt terrible about it for 2 days. I thought about him at 16, giving his Letterman jacket to a girl at school who was being picked on, just so the other kids would leave her alone. How does a boy like that become a man who copies his wife's signature on a mortgage document? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Not really. People aren't math problems. They don't always add up the way you expect them to. Robert used to say something else too, something I hadn't thought about in years, until all of this started. Eusetos I trust is a bank account. Carol Ann. Every good thing you do puts money in. Every bad thing takes it out. And people can go bankrupt without you noticing, right up until the day the check bounces. I didn't understand what he meant back then. I understood it completely by the time this was over. In late May, I ran into Priya's co-worker at the pharmacy on 71st Street. Her name was Denise. She worked with Priya at the accounting firm downtown, and I only knew her because Priya had introduced us once at a company picnic. Denise saw me at the register and her face changed. Just for a second. Like she was deciding something. "How's Priya doing?" she asked me. Quiet. Too quiet for a normal question. "She's fine," I said. "Why?" Denise glanced toward the door. Nobody there. She lowered her voice anyway. "She's missed 3 days this month. Galed in sick. But I saw her car at the mall on one of those days." A pause. She looked like she'd been crying in the parking lot. I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry. "Just," Denise said, already turning to leave. "Check on her." "Okay. Just check on her." She didn't wait for me to answer. She paid for her prescription and walked out. And I stood there holding a bag of Robert's old blood pressure medication I still picked up out of habit, even though he'd been gone 5 years. That night, I didn't sleep. I want to tell you the next part slowly, because it happened slowly. Real life doesn't hand you an answer all at once. It hands you pieces, and you spend weeks arranging them on a table in your head, trying to see if they make a picture. The first piece came on a Tuesday. I called Priya, just to talk, just to check on her the way Denise told me to. She picked up on the 4th ring. Her voice sounded strange. "Flat. I'm fine, Carol," she said. "Just tired. You sound like you've been crying." Silence. 3 full seconds of it. "I have to go," she said. "Daniel's home." She hung up before I could say another word. The second piece came 2 weeks later. I was over at their house, dropping off a casserole dish I'd borrowed, and Priya wasn't home yet from work. Daniel let me in. Distracted, phone in his hand like always. I noticed a stack of mail on the counter. Bank statements. Not addressed to Daniel. Addressed to Priya, but opened. I didn't say anything. I put the casserole dish in the cabinet where it belonged and left. But I kept thinking about it. Why would Daniel be opening his wife's mail? The third piece came from my niece, Ashley, who works in property records for Tulsa County. I called her, told her I had a strange feeling, and asked, not accusing anybody, just asking if she could look something up for me. A parcel of land, 40 acres out near Bixby, that Priya's late grandmother had left her 2 years before. Land that was supposed to be held in Priya's name alone. Ashley called me back 3 days later. "Aunt Caro," she said, "that land got refinanced in March. There's a new mortgage on it, signed by both Daniel and Priya." Priya never mentioned refinancing anything. "Well?" Ashley hesitated. "The signature on the form doesn't look like her other signatures on file. I'm not a handwriting expert, but it doesn't look the same." I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at Robert's old wind chimes through the window for a long time. I didn't sleep much that week. I kept thinking about small things I'd brushed past without examining. The way Daniel had started parking 2 blocks from their house instead of in the driveway. Something Priya mentioned once. Laughing it off, saying he claimed it was better for his knees to walk a little, the way he'd stopped bringing his laptop bag into my house when he visited, when he used to leave it by the door out of habit. I called Marjorie's office. Not my lawyer yet, just a name Renee had given me from her church group, a woman who did consultations for people trying to figure out if they needed a lawyer at all. I didn't tell her it was about my own son. I said a family member. She told me plainly, if somebody is opening mail that isn't theirs, and signatures don't match, that's not a gray area anymore. That's fraud, whether it's a stranger or a spouse. That word fraud sat in my stomach like a stone the rest of that day. I want to tell you about one more piece, because it's the one that finally moved me from suspicion into action. In late June, I was helping Priya carry groceries into her house. Daniel was at work, and her phone buzzed on the counter. A notification. Just a preview. Nothing I went looking for. It was from her bank. Your account ending in 4471 has a new authorized user. Priya's face went pale reading it over my shoulder. I didn't add anybody, she said. Do you know that account? Primera, asked heir. It's my grandmother's inheritance account, the one from the land. Her hands were shaking again, the same way they had at the birthday party. Daniel told me he closed it 2 years ago. He told me the money went into our joint savings. Neither of us said what we were both thinking, but I watched something shift in her face that day, the same way I imagined my own face must have shifted weeks earlier. The moment suspicion stops being a feeling and starts becoming a fact, you have to do something about. By June, I had started keeping a small notebook. Nurses dotat. You learn to chart things, times, dates, exact words, because in a hospital, memory alone isn't good enough. You need a record. June 3. RD Priya calls. Cancels dinner. Voice shaking. June 9 th. Daniel asks to borrow $4,000 for a work thing. Won't explain. June 14th. I see Priya at the grocery store. She has a fresh bruise on her forearm. Says she walked into a cabinet door. June 21st. Ashley confirms 2 more accounts were opened in Priya's name that Priya has no memory of opening. That bruise. I need you to understand what that did to me. I spent 31 years in a maternity ward. But before that, in my 20s, I did 2 years on a general medical floor, and you learn what a defensive bruise looks like versus a cabinet door bruise. You learn the shape of a hand. I didn't confront Daniel yet. I know some of you watching this are already yelling at your screen, asking why I waited. I waited because I needed proof, not suspicion. A mother's gut feeling doesn't hold up in a courtroom, and by then, I already knew, somewhere deep down, that this might end up in one. The call that changed everything came at 1:47 in the morning, on the 11th of October. I remember the time exactly because I looked at my clock radio the second it rang. Half asleep, my heart already pounding before I even answered. Carol. Priya's voice. Barely a whisper. Can I come to your house? Priya, what's wrong? Please. I just need somewhere to go. I don't want to wake him. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across my living room curtains. I opened the door before she even knocked. And there she was. Barefoot. No coat. In 40-degree weather, a duffel bag half-zipped, like she'd packed it in the dark without turning on a light. And in her right hand, clenched so tight, her knuckles were white, a single brass key, not a house key. Smaller. Older. Please, don't make me go back inside that house, she said. I pulled her in and wrapped Robert's old flannel jacket around her shoulders, the one I still keep on the coat hook by the door. What happened? I asked. Priya, what is that key? She looked down at it like she'd forgotten it was even in her hand. It's the only proof I have, she whispered. He doesn't know I took it. We sat at my kitchen table until almost 5 in the morning. I made tea neither of us drank. She talked in pieces, stopping and starting, the way people do when they've been holding something in for a long time and it comes out wrong the first few tries. Here's what she told me, as close to her own words as I can remember them. Daniel had a second bank account, not a joint account, a private one, opened using her identity, her social security number, forged signatures that Ashley had already He'd been funneling money into it for over a year. Money from the refinance on her grandmother's 40 acres. Money borrowed against her name from 2 credit cards she never opened. Where was it going? Primera asket er. She looked at the key in her hand. A storage unit, she said, off Memorial Drive. I followed him there 3 weeks ago. I didn't go in. I was too scared. But last night, while he was asleep, I took his spare keyring off the dresser. This was on Italiano. I don't even think he noticed it was gone. Have you opened the unit? She shook her head. I was afraid of what I'd find. And the bruise, I said. Quiet. Careful. The one on your arm in June. Her eyes filled up, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. Once. He grabbed me, she said. When I asked about the account, it was the first time. I told myself it would be the last time. It wasn't. How many times? Priya? She was quiet for a long moment. turning the brass key over and over in her fingers like it was a rosary. 3, she said finally. The last one was 2 weeks ago. He didn't hit me. He's never hit me. But he grabbed my wrists hard enough to leave marks. And he backed me into the bathroom door, and he told me if I ever went through his things again, I'd regret it. Her voice cracked on the word regret. I believed him. Why didn't you call me sooner? She looked down at the table. Because he's your son. Because I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? What if I blow up this whole family over a misunderstanding? You raised him. I didn't want to be the woman who destroyed your family. I reached across the table and took both of her hands, key and all. Priya, listen to me. You didn't destroy anything. If any of this is true, he destroyed it the day he forged your name on a piece of paper. You're not the one who needs to apologize to this family. She cried then. Finally, the kind of crying that comes out sideways after being held in too long, shoulders shaking, no sound for the first several seconds, like her body had forgotten how. I want to pause here and tell you something, because I think it matters. I did not react the way I thought I would. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something in me went very still and very cold. The same stillness I used to feel in the delivery room when something went wrong and there wasn't time to panic. Jews, move. Jews, act. Okay, I told her. We're going to figure this out. Together, but we're doing it the right way. With proof, with people who can actually help. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not Daniel's lawyer, a friend of mine from church, Marjorie Kim, who'd spent 20 years doing family and financial fraud cases downtown. Bring everything you have, she told me over the phone. Bank statements. That notebook you mentioned, and whatever's in that storage unit, if you can get it documented properly, without breaking any laws to do it. 2 days later, Priya, Marjorie, and I stood outside a storage facility off Memorial Drive. Unit 214. The brass key fit perfectly. Marjorie made us wait outside while she called a private investigator she trusted, a retired police detective named Frank Alvarez, to be present so everything was documented the right way. Chain of custody and all that, so nothing could get thrown out later. Frank opened the unit with a small camera running. Inside, 3 filing boxers of financial documents, a laptop, 2 more credit cards in Priya's name that she'd never seen before, and, underneath a tarp in the back corner, 4 sealed envelopes of cash, $40,000 total, according to what Frank counted later, with 2 witnesses present. Priya didn't say a word. She just stood in the doorway of that storage unit, with her hand over her mouth. 9 months, she said finally. 9 months. I told myself I was imagining things. I put my arm around her. You weren't imagining anything, sweetheart. You were surviving. Frank the investigator crouched down by one of the filing boxers, pulling out folders with gloved hands, laying them carefully on a portable table he'd brought along. This is thorough, he said, half to himself. Whoever did this kept records. That's good for you too. Bad for him. Inside those folders were bank statements going back 14 months, credit applications with Priya's information typed in by somebody who clearly knew her social security number, her mother's maiden name, every security answer a bank might ask for. There was a folder labeled, in Daniel's handwriting, Simply Restaurant Fund, an investment in a barbecue restaurant downtown that Priya had never once heard mentioned in 3 years of marriage. He told me he was saving for a boat, Priya said quietly, staring at that folder. 80 months ago. He said he wanted to surprise me with a boat for our anniversary. There was no boat. There had never been a boat. We stood in that storage unit for almost 2 hours while Frank documented everything, photographing each page, AR envelope, each credit card, narrating the date and time out loud for his own recorded log. Marjorie stood off to the side making notes of her own, occasionally asking Priya to confirm a detail. Is this your signature? Do you recognize this account number? Did you authorize this? By the time we left, the sun was going down, and Priya hadn't eaten anything all day. I took her to my house and made her scrambled eggs at 7 in the evening, because it was the only thing I could think to do with my hands. What happens now? She asked me, pushing eggs around her plate without really eating them. Now, I said, we let people who know how to do this the right way take over. And you and I focus on getting you somewhere safe. Marjorie filed for a protective order first, the fastest thing she could do to keep Priya safe, while the rest of the investigation moved forward. Then came the harder part, building the fraud case, working with a detective at the Tulsa Police Financial Crimes Unit, a woman named Detective Ruiz, who had seen this pattern more times than she wanted to admit. Identity theft within a marriage is more common than people think, she told us, sitting in Marjorie's office with a folder full of our documents. Spouses have access. Nobody questions. Banks don't flag it the same way. She asked Priya dozens of questions. Dates, numbers, the bruise. Priya answered every one. her voice steadier every day that passed, like she was slowly remembering what her own voice sounded like. I sat in on most of those meetings, not because Marjorie needed me there, legally, but because Priya asked me to. She told me once, in the hallway outside Marjorie's office, "You're the only family I have left that still believes me." That sentence sat in my chest for a long time. Detective Ruiz decided the safest way to move forward was a controlled meeting, not an ambush, nothing dramatic, just a request for Daniel to come in and answer questions about the accounts. With Marjorie and Priya present, along with a financial affidavit already prepared showing the fraud in black and white, I asked to be there. Ruiz said family could sit in the waiting area, but not the room itself, so I sat in a plastic chair outside a conference room at the Tulsa Police Financial Crimes Office on a Thursday afternoon in November, and I listened through a door that wasn't quite soundproof. I heard Daniel's voice first, casual, almost annoyed. "This is ridiculous. What is this about?" Then Marjorie's voice, calm, laying out the documents one by one. The refinance, the credit cards, the storage unit, the $40,000. Silence. A long one. Then Daniel's voice again. "Higher this time," cracking at the edges. "Priya, you went through my things." "You had no right." "They weren't your things," Priya said. Her voice didn't shake once. "They were mine. My grandmother's land. My name. My signature. You copied off a birthday card." More silence. Then a sound I will never forget. A chair scraping hard against the floor, and Daniel's voice breaking entirely. "I was going to pay it back," he said. "I just needed time. The business investment didn't work out the way I thought it would. And I panicked. And I—" "You grabbed my arm in June," Priya said. "Was that part of the plan, too?" Nothing. No answer at all. Then Detective Ruiz's voice, steady, procedural. "Mr. Whitfield, I need to inform you that this conversation has been recorded with all parties' knowledge, and that, based on the documentation provided today, this matter is being referred for formal charges. You're not under arrest right now, but I'd strongly recommend you contact an attorney before we speak again." A long pause. Then Daniel's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it, even smaller than when he was a boy scared of thunderstorms. "Mom's out there, isn't she?" he said. Not really a question. Nobody answered him. A minute later, the door opened, and Daniel walked out first. Not looking at me, not looking at anybody. Straight past the plastic chairs and out into the parking lot. I heard his car start up too fast, tires chirping a little as he pulled out. Priya came out next, Marjorie's hand steady on her shoulder. Her eyes were red, but her spine was straight, straighter than I'd seen it in months. "You okay?" "Primera, asquetje. I don't know yet," she said honestly. But I said everything I needed to say. That has to count for something. I sat outside that door with my hands folded in my lap, and I thought about the little boy who used to fall asleep in my arms during thunderstorms, who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers, and I mourned him. Not the man in that room, the boy I used to know, who, I think, somewhere along the way, I lost without ever noticing him leave. I drove home that night the long way, past the elementary school Daniel went to, past the Little League field where Robert used to coach on Saturday mornings. I don't know why. I think some part of me was looking for the exact moment things went wrong, as if I could find it sitting there in the dark, marked with a sign. There wasn't one. There never is. That's the hardest part to accept. I'll move a little faster through this part, because a lot happened over the following months, and I don't want to lose you in the paperwork of it. Daniel was charged with identity theft, financial exploitation, and forgery under Oklahoma statute. The domestic violence allegation was investigated separately, and Priya, with Marjorie's help, filed for and received a permanent protective order. The divorce was filed in December, uncontested. In the end, because there wasn't much left for Daniel to fight for, Priya's lawyer secured full restitution rights to her grandmother's land, and the court ordered Daniel to repay the $40,000 found in the storage unit plus damages. On a payment plan that will likely take him most of a decade to complete, he took a plea deal in February, rather than go to trial. 18 months, with time served and good behavior calculated in, plus 5 years of probation and a restitution order that follows him for the next several years of his life. I won't pretend this part didn't break something in me. I visited him twice. Early on. The second time, he wouldn't look at me. He said I chose her over him. I told him the truth. I said, I didn't choose her over you. You chose this, the day you copied her signature. I just chose not to lie about it. I haven't been back since. Some doors, once you understand what's behind them, you have to be brave enough to close. There's a part of this I haven't told you yet, and I think you deserve to hear it, because it's the part that hurt the most in a different way than everything else. At the sentencing hearing in February, the judge asked if any family members wished to speak. Priya's lawyer had prepared a statement, but at the last minute, Priya asked me if I wanted to say something too. I almost said no. What do you say, standing in a courtroom, about your own son? In the end, I stood up. I told the judge that I raised Daniel to know right from wrong, and that whatever happened between the boy I raised and the man who stood before that court, the responsibility for closing that gap belonged to him and to nobody else. I said I loved my son, and that loving him didn't mean protecting him from the truth of what he'd done. Daniel didn't look at me while I spoke, not once. I don't think I expected him to. Renee sat with me through most of it, held my hand through the parts I couldn't get through with a steady voice. My sister has always been better than me at knowing when to just be quiet and let someone lean on her. The financial fallout kept unfolding 4 months after the plea deal. The restaurant investment Daniel had poured money into collapsed entirely. Turned out his business partner had been running a similar scheme of his own, and the whole thing folded within weeks of the story, becoming public knowledge among people who knew the family. Daniel lost his job at the insurance agency where he'd worked for 6 years. Not because of any company policy. Exactly. But because word travels fast in a city the size of Tulsa, and clients started asking questions his employer didn't want to answer. 6 months later, the first Sunday dinner without Daniel felt strange. Like a missing tooth, your tongue keeps finding. Renee's boys asked where their cousin's dad was, and Renee handled it the way she handles everything, gently and without too many details. Priya came that day, hesitant, standing on my porch for a full minute before she knocked. The same porch, though this time in shoes and a proper coat. I opened the door and she just said, "Is it too strange? Me still coming here?" "You're still my family," I told her. That part didn't stop being true. She stayed for 4 hours that day. We didn't talk about the case much. We talked about her new apartment, about the tomato plants she wanted to put in when spring came, about a promotion she was up for at the accounting firm now that Denisa, of all people, had become one of her closest friends there. Before she left, she stood by the door for a moment, looking at Robert's old wind chimes. "He built those?" she asked, though she already knew. "He built half this house," I said. "Additions, mostly. He wasn't a patient man with people, but he was endlessly patient with wood and nails." "I think that's part of why I trust you," Priya said. "You come from people who build things instead of tearing them down." I didn't have an answer for that. I just hugged her a little longer than usual, before she walked to her car. Priya still lives in Tulsa. Different house now, smaller, closer to her office, with a little garden out front where she's growing tomatoes she brags about entirely too much. She comes to Sunday dinner most weeks. She brings dessert now instead of the folding chairs. Last month she brought me a new tin of cardamom because I told her I'd used up the one from 3 years ago. We don't talk about Daniel much. When we do, it's brief. Factual. She told me last week that his restitution payments have been arriving on time so far, and that's about all either of us needs to know. She still has the key. I asked her about it a few months ago. Sitting on my porch on a warm evening, the same porch where she once stood barefoot in the cold, she pulled it out of her purse and turned it over in her fingers. "I keep it because it reminds me I trusted myself," she said. "Even when I didn't want to. Even when everyone, including me, told me I was imagining things." That's the piece I want to leave you with tonight, because I think it's the whole point of everything that happened. My husband used to tell me I'd worry a stone into a mountain, but I've learned something since then, something I wish I'd understood a lot sooner. Sometimes the mountain is real. Sometimes your worry isn't the problem. It's the warning. If you were May sitting in that kitchen at 2 in the morning with a barefoot woman and a mystery key, would you have done anything differently? Would you have believed her right away? Or would you have needed proof the way I did? Tell me in the comments where you're watching this from tonight. And tell me honestly, what would you have done? If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. Because there are more stories like this one coming, and every single one of them starts the same way mine did, with somebody brave enough to finally tell the truth. The quiet rise.